Does anybody remember my ultra profound point from my homily last week? It's okay. 2 words, let it. It's very profound, I know. It took me 17 minutes to say that last week. Let it. So I was asking the question, why are we here? Why do we come to this thing? Why do we show up at church on Sunday mornings? And if aliens landed and asked us, what y'all doing here? Hopefully we can start giving a better answer than, because Jesus wants us to be nice, don't you know? But no, there's this great announcement. He's been raised. He's not dead. He's been raised. That's the greeting of the early Christians, remember. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. It's a great greeting. But the greeting isn't just, this dead guy's now alive. The greeting is, he's been raised, which means everything's different. The world's different. Life is different. Everything has changed. The world has changed because this man rose from the dead. And if that's so, if the world is now different, we have to let it change us. We have to allow that fact to change our life. We have to allow this event to change our life and everything in our life. But we have to then think, what typically shapes our life? What is it that determines our life? What is it that, think of a Thursday morning. What gets you out of bed on a Thursday morning? Work, kids, school, maybe the dog peed all over the floor. I don't know. Maybe Thursday's your day off. You have nothing to get you out of bed on a Thursday. Well, I don't know. What is it that determines what you wear each day? Work, school, my kids. What outfit did my kid not barf on yet? Does this make me look fat or not? Like things like that. What determines how you spend your time? Work, kids, school. This other person did this and had a lot of fun. I want to try that out. There's this new Netflix series out. Got to watch that. That's going to take some time. That's what determines our time. What is it that we worry about on a daily basis? Work, money, bills, kids, school. Does this make me look fat? Like all over and over and over. What are these things that determine our life? Facts. These are real things. Real facts in our life determine our life. Cool. And this isn't a comprehensive list, but we get the idea. This is the stuff of daily life. But think back to Monday morning, 6.5, 7 days ago, however you count it. The day after Easter. What got you out of bed on Monday morning? The fact that Christ had risen from the dead? Or it's a Monday, got work, got kids, got a dog. It's easy to say, all right, this fact is going to change my life. But then we get to the nitty-gritty of it and we go, it's not really changing much yet. So it's difficult. Think of it this other way too. What if someone that grew up on a desert island and they magically knew how to read? They were given a copy of the Bible. They were given a copy of just the early writings of the church. And they started to read about, these are the people that followed this guy. These are the first people that heard, he's risen from the dead. This is what they were like. And then he shows up here in Lions America in 2023, and he looks around at us this morning. Would he be able to point to us and say, those are the people. Those are the ones that follow this guy that rose from the dead? Would he be able to just look at us and say that? The answer should be yes. But would he be able to tell that? Would he be able to just look at our life really quick and say, that's the people. Those are the ones that believe that Jesus rose from the dead. So we have to allow this fact, we have to allow this event to completely transform our lives, or it doesn't really mean anything. I'm pretty sure most of us think Jesus rose from the dead. But then the question is, but do you really? Because if we really believe that, it begins to transform everything. It transforms the way that we see the world around us. It transforms the way that we see relationships that we have in our life. It transforms the way that we make decisions. Can people see that? Can I see that? In other words, am I truly following Christ? Or do I just go to church on Sunday mornings because that's what I'm supposed to do? Today, we want to answer briefly just 3 simple questions. So what did it look like for those early followers of Christ? What were they doing? Then why did they do that? They could have done a lot of things, but why did they do what they did? And so what does it look like for me? For those of us that were taking part in rerouting, or if you just have a super good memory, we talked several weeks ago about the DNA. Remember the DNA thing? Nope. Okay, never mind. It was a long time ago. That's fair. We talked about DNA and how you can have just a little bit of DNA in your body messed up, and it can literally be lethal. Like this one tiny little thing out of line, and it's lethal to you. It's the same thing with the church. When our DNA gets messed up, even just a little, it can be deadly to what the church is, to what this is that we're doing. So what did the early church's DNA look like? What was the practical stuff that they did day to day? If you want to know that, you can go read the Acts of the Apostles. It's just a beautiful account of the first couple of decades of the church, but it gives that account of that day-to-dayness of their life. And we had, surprise and shock, that's what we had for our first reading today, the second chapter of Acts. And it told us, what were they doing? They devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles, to the communal life, to the breaking of the bread, and to the prayers. So simple. The very first, just day spanking one, this is what they started doing. They devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles. They wanted to know more. It's one thing to say, this guy rose from the dead. On the first day of Pentecost, 5,000 people were baptized? They all went for it. They're like, all right, he rose from the dead. But then they went, could you tell us a little bit more? What does that mean? What did this guy teach? There's no such thing as Bibles back then, no such thing as books, no such thing as Google, no such thing as a catechism or something. So the only source that they had for anything about this Jesus guy were the apostles. So they dedicated themselves to their teaching. They wanted to know more. They had to learn more. I can't just stand up. I could try, but you all would leave very quickly. If I stood up here every Sunday and just said, he's risen from the dead, and then went and sat down, you would laugh the first week. The second week, you'd go like, what? And then by the third week, you'd go, all right, we're done with this. No, we have to know more. We have to listen to the teaching of the apostles. Okay, second thing that they did, they dedicated themselves to the communal life. If they were going to live this out, they were intensely aware, day one, we cannot do this alone. There's no such thing as Lone Ranger Catholicism. They knew that I can't just go to my house and live this with me and Jesus. They're like, no, we have to live this as a community. So the communal life, and the life of the community became essential, not just important, it became essential to following after Christ. The third thing that they did is they dedicated themselves to the breaking of the bread. This is biblical code. This phrase, breaking of the bread, that's biblical code for the Eucharist, for the Mass. You go read the letters of St. Paul. He uses the breaking of the bread. It's this code word for the Mass, the Eucharist. So they dedicated themselves to that. We've talked a lot in the past several weeks about what the Mass is, how it makes this event present. But the early Christians also talked about it as the day we cannot live without. A Sunday, in the Sunday Eucharist, the Sunday Mass, the breaking of the bread, it became essential to living this out. We cannot live without this day. That's what they would say. The fourth thing then is what? They dedicated themselves to the prayers, not just to praying, to the prayers. They were all good Jews, which meant that they were very accustomed to praying 3 times throughout the day, in the morning, in the evening, and at night. So when it says that they dedicated themselves to the prayers, it meant that they dedicated themselves to continuing this ritual of prayer, praying the Psalms each and every day, praying the Scriptures each and every day. So they would continue this regular life of prayer, but just with a new intensity. The reading went on. You were all paying attention really good, I know, but the reading went on to say there was one other thing that they did, and it was wild. And this is the ludicrous part. And this is the part we gloss over and say, we're not doing that. That's kind of crazy. But this is what it said. They would sell their property and possessions and divide them among all, according to each one's need. If you want to look for the clearest evidence that people thought that this resurrection thing was real, that's it. Grown men started selling what they had and just throwing their money away. That is ludicrous. They would go up to the apostles and say, hey, we don't need this anymore. It's yours. Do something good with it. They would say, I took care of my kids are fed, paid for my house, things are good, but this, I don't need this. Take it. I heard somebody's in need. Help them out with it. They just all of a sudden, the way that they saw the world, money became of no importance to them. That's wild. If you keep reading in Acts, there's one other crazy thing that happened. There's a lot of crazy things, but another crazy thing that happened, Peter and the apostles got arrested one day because they kept running around town telling people, he's risen from the dead. And the authorities eventually pull them in and they say, hey, you got to stop telling people that. In fact, we order you, stop telling people that. Stop telling people he rose from the dead. And the apostles went, no, we won't. And so they beat them. They beat them. They were willing to endure beatings for this one simple announcement. He's risen from the dead. This is what they were doing in the very first days of this. The very first days. That's what they were doing. So the simple question is why? If that's the what, what's the why? Why would they do this? And like I said last week, it seems too simple to be true. But the simple answer for why they were doing this is because they believed it. They believe with every fiber of their being that he had risen from the dead. Again, not just that the tomb was empty, not just that he's alive again, but that because he rose from the dead, everything is changed. They base their entire life on this fact. Three easy ways to talk about it is they began to live their lives based on that fact, but then they also began to live their lives in such a way that they could sustain the memory of that fact, to remember that constantly. And then also because they wanted to bear witness to it. Again, I just said three minutes ago, what shapes our life on a Thursday morning? Work, kids, school, whatever that is. That's what we base our lives off of, those facts of life. But these early Christians were shaped by a different fact. A different fact woke them up on a Thursday morning. They didn't dedicate themselves day after day to whatever talking head they could find, to cable news, to this ESPN's latest show, whatever they wanted to hear about, the news. No, they dedicated themselves, they filled their minds with the teaching of the apostles. They dedicated themselves to the prayers, the breaking of the bread, to the community. Why? Why were they willing to endure martyrdom? It's because Christ had risen. And these were the ways that they based their life off of that fact. It's very practical. It's nothing pie in the sky. It's very, very concrete what they did. They also did this because they knew we need a way to remember this. I'm getting old. I'm getting very, very old. Does anybody start to forget things like I do? Okay. So we begin to forget very easily. So they needed a way to sustain their memory, to remember what had happened and why they were living this way. I once asked my spiritual director at seminary, I think he was 135 years old. He was like this tall because he was just so old and just shriveling up. He was so great, so holy. But one day I asked him, when did you decide to become a priest? And he looks at me and he just goes, today. I was like, what? What did he mean? He means he'd been a priest for like 80 years. What he meant is, I decided to become a priest when I woke up this morning. You decided to stay married, at least, when you woke up this morning. You decide to be a Christian each and every day that you wake up in the morning. Each and every day we have to renew this yes, that this is the fact that we base our life on. This is the fact that has changed our life. And we need simple ways to help us do that. What did the early Christians do? Listen to what the apostles were teaching them. Communal life, breaking of the bread, the prayers, giving their money away, willing to endure beatings. Again, their yes was so profound that they said, yes, even if I get beat up today, I will continue to let this fact change my life. The third big reason then for why they live this way is because it bore witness. Again, think of the simple example that they started giving their money away. People would have looked at them like they were crazy. They may not have believed in Jesus, but they sure did start to believe that these people believed that Jesus was real. When they started to say, I can't show up on this Sunday. We've got this thing called the breaking of the bread. I have to show up for that. Other people didn't believe in Jesus, but they started to believe that these people were serious about it. When they were it's for you, if you pray before meals, at lunch, at work, make the sign of the cross, and everyone else in the lunchroom looks at you like, okay, weirdo. They don't believe in Jesus, fine. But they'll start to believe that we actually believe it. Why did the Christians behave this way? It's because it bore witness. It started to show other people in the community that they were serious about this, That this wasn't just a weird thing we do on Sunday mornings, but this actually is the fact that I've based my life off of. This is what changes my life. That is what has changed my life. So then the simple question for us is, well, what does it look like for me? What does it look like for me moving forward? Christ has risen. He's risen indeed. All right, this is going to be what determines my life. So what do I do? Go back to the early church. This is what I do, especially in the parish. When I start thinking about, well, what's the next step to take? What do we have to do? I go to the book of Acts, especially this passage, and just build everything around it. What is it that helps us to learn? Well, we need to base everything off the teaching of the apostles, which means the teaching that we've inherited for the past 2,000 years, but also what the chief apostle, Pope Francis, says, but what our local apostle, what Bishop Kemi tells us. It's paying close attention to that. It's making sure that we focus on the community and supporting one another in the community, in these smaller communities that we call families. Yes, to support the domestic church. It's making sure that the Eucharist and Sunday is a primary thing. It's making sure that we dedicate ourselves to a life of prayer. All of this, these are the key building blocks for our faith. But like I said at the end of rerouting, it's not just, hey, Father Michael, what are you going to do? Dance for us, monkey. What's next? No, the question is, what am I going to do? What are you going to do? How do I continue to live this? And if you want a simple way to begin to ask that question in a very practical way, go back to our first reading today from the book of Acts. Ask yourselves the questions like, am I filling my mind with the teachings of the apostles? Am I filling my mind each and every day with Scripture, with the teaching of the church, with what Christ has given to us? Or do I just fill my mind with any talking head that comes my way? Do I dedicate myself to this community of believers, to this parish? Do I seek out the support from this community? Or do I dedicate myself to every other community except this one? Do I try to Lone Ranger it as a Catholic? Do I hang out with people that actively discourage me from living my faith? Again, we all hang out with a lot of people, but do we come back to this community to find our support, to continue forward? Am I dedicated to the Sunday Eucharist and to Mass? Am I uncompromising about the Sunday Eucharist? Is this the day that I can't live without? Or, Sunday, I can make it today, can't make it next week. No. Is this the day we can't live without? Do I dedicate myself to regular prayer each and every day? Do I take time to pray in the morning, in the evening, and in the night? Or am I really busy? But if I look at my phone, I've just recognized that I spent 4.5 hours watching TikTok yesterday, so maybe I could have found a little bit of time to pray. Right? Do we take that time each and every day to pray? And am I generous with my money? Am I generously tithing to the church? Am I generously helping out others in need? Or is money just about me and what I can do for myself? And then the big question, is this something that I'm willing to endure beatings for? Here in Rice County, pretty unlikely that you'll literally get beat up, but am I willing to endure other people looking at me funny? Am I willing to endure people gossiping about me? Am I willing to endure the things that people are going to say about me? Or at the first sign of trouble, do I say, yeah, this is stupid, I'm moving on? These are the very practical questions that we can begin to ask. Because it's the question, as we begin to take these steps as a parish, these are the big questions that we have to ask. Because the great joy of Easter, the great journey that we've been promised through rerouting, the life of discipleship that we've committed to following, the new life that Christ wants to offer us and is offering us, it's not magic. Just like when you hear about a diet and exercise is what you need to do to lose weight, it's still not magic. We know it, but now you have to do it. The question, the great homily that I preached at Easter, it's back to just 2 words. We have to let it. We have to allow this to change our life. And in the Easter season, especially during the Easter season, this is the time that we say, yes, Lord, I will allow this. I will let this change my entire life.